Boom.
Welcome to episode 3 of Fire Mountain. We are so pleased you've joined us today. It's great to have you with us. So much has happened this week that we are going to be getting into it in a bit. But Dom,
so much has happened.
What a week.
Let me just say one more time. This, I swear, is the last week we're going to use that bumper. I swear it. I swear it. If I have to listen to that one more time, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's not good.
You love it.
No.
You absolutely love it.
But let's get back to the good news. Well, good news in my opinion.
Come on.
Go on. New restrictions being eased across the United Kingdom.
It's happening.
Because COVID is no longer a threat anymore.
Exactly.
Oh,
exactly.
Wonderful.
And all now, office parties are allowed. Other parties are allowed.
Lunchtime work parties with wine and whatever else you might want at your party.
Basically, do whatever you like from next week. That's what's happening in this whole vibe.
You know what? I know that there is mixed vibes across the nation. Like, I found that out on my social media post yesterday when I put out some celebratory remarks. But ultimately, you know, I believe that it's a step in the right direction. Some people might think it's too aggressive. We'll talk about that in a bit. But how do you feel about it?
As always, whatever you think, please pop them into the comments down below. If you're on YouTube, type them into the comments. If you're on Facebook, type them into the comments. And if you want to, you can email us at firemountain@sunnyhill.church.
The irony today is that it's called Fire Mountain.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever been colder.
No.
This place is freezing.
Ice Mountain
Ice
is where
hole.
we're at.
Ice hole? Okay. Anyways, so, ultimately, this big news. So if you're not from the United Kingdom, I imagine that you're following it in the media because, we're a pretty big deal, right?
Massive.
Ultimately, from next Thursday, right, no more face masks, mandatory, right, which is awesome sauce, especially for church, because I hate wearing face masks.
Yeah.
Okay. Also,
please do get this right, because if you get it wrong, YouTube will knock us off. So get the information right.
That is true. I will get a nice little warning below that being controversial content. You know, for full information on vaccines and their efficacy, go to this website. But ultimately, so no more obligatory mask wearing.
Yeah.
Okay, unless you want to wear a mask.
Yeah.
No COVID passports
Nope.
in the United Kingdom. Praise the good Lord Jesus that's happening.
Yeah.
Because it's nice living in a free democratic society, I think. The third thing is, what is the third thing?
So already by now, schools and working from home, scrapped.
Praise Jesus. Yeah.
So no masks at schools.
Schools are scrapped.
Yeah.
Oh.
No education, no working from home.
My kids would be partying if that was the case. Yeah. So all that. And then from the 24th of March...
No more isolation.
No more isolation. So if you get COVID...
Carry on as normal, from what I understand.
So go to work.
Hang out with your friends. Basically, it's like you've got the flu now.
That's pretty incredible. I guess the big question that we need to get into today is, what is the motive behind the relaxing of these restrictions, right?
That is the question. But before we jump into that question... We had a comment come in, and the comment really referred to the plant. Hold on, let's just pull it up here. This plant right over here. The question was asked is that a cannabis plant?
So someone has emailed in and asking. Now, obviously, me and Richard have no idea what cannabis plant looks like, but we're worried about the one who wrote in.
Yeah, we're very worried. And
I believe he comes to Sunny Hill.
We might be called Fire Mountain, but that in no way relates to a cannabis plant.
The problem with Fire Mountain, it certainly sounds like some commune, doesn't it? Yeah. In some Pacific island.
The kibbutz,
like the beach.
Fire Mountain.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we don't know what you're talking about.
No idea.
For us, this is just a beautiful bit of greenery as a backdrop.
To be honest, that's an IKEA plant. So... if it is cannabis, IKEA's got bigger issues going on.
I don't, me and Hillsong, we don't do IKEA. Do you know why?
Why?
Because we dare not trust a Swedish frame.
Oh, yeah. And Fire Mountain is shut down. Basically,
it happened.
We're done.
It happened. Accept it. It's so good.
That is terrible.
That's a brilliant joke.
That is a terrible, terrible joke. But
do you get it?
I do get it.
Are you sure?
I absolutely do get it.
I don't know.
It doesn't make it any better, though. Let's be honest.
I dare not trust a Swedish frame. Hey, I got rid of all the Germans on my phone, by the way.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's now hands-free. What do you reckon?
This has taken a turn, and it's not a great turn. So what we're going to do is we're going to be going into a worship song by our friends over in New Zealand at Equippers.
Yeah.
And then when we're back, we're going to be jumping into some juicy stuff that's gone on this week.
Engaging with some of the comments that have come in, because not everyone, surprisingly, agrees with me.
It's true.
And not everyone agrees with you.
It's
so
true.
we polarized opinion, which we like to do. That's fine.
Absolutely. And so there's people who agree with me, and then there's everyone else who's wrong. Clearly.
Yeah, well, exactly right. I mean, ultimately, at Fire Mountain, we value the conversation, don't we?
Yeah.
We value the discourse.
Yeah.
Like, the world seems to be anti-conversation.
Yes.
Have your opinion, get stuck in the mud, and do not move. But we think actually talking about this stuff actually opens our mind and actually makes us more humble and willing to accept, what might God want to say on this issue? And that's really the heart of today's episode. So we're going to jump into a song by our Equippers friends, and we're singing this at church today in the room at Paul Campus.
Oh, amazing.
You Never Let Me Go. Enjoy it, guys.
Your love in me has set me on fire. This joy I feel brings me to life. Let songs of praise fall off my lips. These songs replay again and again. I'm holding on to all your love. My praise goes on, and I will never let you go. And I will never let you go. I can't explain this hope that I found. Once alone, you're here with me now. And I'm holding on to all your love. My praise goes on, and I will never let you go. And I will never let you go. And I will never let you go. I won't give you up. You're all I need. All my praise goes up. I give you everything. I won't give you up. You're all I need. All my praise goes up. I give you everything. And I'm holding on to all your love. My praise goes on, and I will never let you go. I'm holding on to all your love. My praise goes on, and I will never let you go. And I will never let you go. And I will never let you go.
Man, that song brilliantly kind of, I don't know, it reflects the vibe I'm in, feeling about the easing of restrictions. Honestly.
What? I will never let you go. Is this? I feel like it's a conflicting message.
I mean, let me just say, I'm not singing that to my mask. Just like, God, you're so good, you're so faithful. Thank you for getting us through these crazy last 2 years detour.
Oh, yeah.
But I think, like, ultimately, we need to chat about this, don't
Yeah.
we?
Yeah.
We need to talk about...
We got to get into it. We got to get into it because we are not going to be seeing eye to eye on everything that's happened.
Really? What,
here.
me and you?
Yeah.
Not agreeing on every single
Weird, I know.
issue?
Weird, I know.
weird. It is
I
weird.
know.
It is.
So, off the bat,
Yeah.
let's jump in. Obviously, you are pro the fact that all of the restrictions are gone.
Can I tell you, one of the hardest things I've found in ministry in the last 2 years is publicly doing one thing, but feeling on the inside something totally different. So let me explain that. Because people might be thinking, what are you talking about? Face mask wearing, okay? I understand that we have a public duty to do that. Now, I would question for how safe is this making the people? Now, I know that is a kind of a fire starting topic, but ultimately, I do it because that's our risk assessment. That's what we've agreed is the best practice for us in light of the guidance from the government and all that kind of stuff. So, cool, okay. But on the inside, I'm like, I hate face masks. I hate the fact that we're encouraging people to kind of put something over their mouth that restricts their expression of worship and relationship to one another. For the last 2 years, that has been for me one of the greatest challenges, is almost like trying to present one thing, but on the inside, feeling totally at odds with the thing I'm presenting.
So,
Yes.
is it that you hate what the face masks are, or is it that you hate what the face masks represent? Is it because it was legislated, you've got to wear a face covering, that made you go, I'm not going to want to wear a face covering? Or did you go, even if they said, do you know what? Like, wear it, don't wear it. But if you want to, we think it's better. And you'd have gone, no, I have real concern over the face coverings.
I think, my personal opinion is this, is that the face masks actually do have a psychological effect on people. I think they restrict speech. And I think in a church setting, I've seen it with my own eyes. It restricts engagement. It restricts worship. Sunny Hill has pushed through that wall, which is awesome, because we shouldn't allow a piece of cloth to prevent our expression of worship. I get it. But as soon as you cover someone's mouth, it feels like bondage, man. It feels like, no. And so I know really the heart of your question is, do I have a maverick spirit that just wants to like jump on the grass where there's a sign, don't step on the grass? Maybe there's a bit of that in me.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a bit of that in me. But also I like the fact that, like, I definitely prefer the idea that people can choose, like, put it on if you feel more comfortable. But I also still think that the verdict's a little bit out on the science of it as well. Having looked into it, I'm not convinced that this is really... I watched a really funny video the other day, someone who was vaping, right? And they pulled down their face masks, right, to vape, to take in this big toke of whatever that is. They put their face mask back up, and literally as they breathed out, the smoke, like... And I was just watching it, seeing the smoke come out, just thinking, what is that mask even stopping coming out of that person's mouth? So, like, I know that, like, surely this is a great thing for you, Richard, because for 2 years, you've been following me around church saying, Dom, put your face mask back on your face. That's where the mask needs to live.
The best thing I've seen in 2 years is an unnamed person on our staff. We won't name them, but if we had to, we would say Jay Parker. No, that's... Let's say Jakey P. I mean, who was wearing a face mask, needed to cough, and so removed the mask to cough to replace the mask back afterwards.
Oh my God.
100% defeating the purpose of the mask. Loving it.
Just because I'm going to be, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be talking about the power of confession, right? Right. I'm going to be talking about confessing not just our sin to God, but sin to godly friends. Okay. And we'll talk about that in a few weeks. But just to confess to you here, to be honest, right? On Sunday, I was talking to a lovely family at church last Sunday, and I didn't have a face mask on because face mask prevents talking like a normal human being, okay? Because it's kind of like, what? So I took my face mask down, and you called from the back.
Yeah.
Do you remember what you called?
Yeah.
What did you call?
Dom.
And I'm like,
Dom.
yes, Richard, and I know what's coming.
Mask. Put on your mask.
What you didn't see me do was I got my face mask and I threw it at you. That isn't what you saw, is it? But that's what happened. And then God kind of said, Dom, come on, Richard's just kind of serving what the church has kind of put in place. So then I walked to the 4 rows. I mean, you were about, 60 feet away from me, so no chance. But I was, turd sniffer. Anyways, confession time done. We should have like a wooden plinth here with a little
hole.
Yeah,
and it should just say the other side. If you've been throwing your face masks or not wearing
at
them,
your friends and colleagues,
come down over here.
Well, I apologise for that.
No. I mean, let's just put that on camera. Look at the camera.
Yeah. Richard and all the other good people of Sunny Hill who has struggled with my inability to keep the mask in place for 2 years. I apologise to you, but now times are changing. But you can still wear your mask.
And we just want to say, on behalf of everybody at Sunny Hill, because you're only talking about confession, we don't forgive you because forgiveness hasn't come up yet. So unlucky for you.
Well, you know what? Now the rules have eased somewhat, or will be eased.
You'll start wearing your face mask.
I'm going to start wearing. I want to start putting it on. It seems like a great idea because I choose. It's the power of choice, man. I choose to wear it.
So this is my argument about the whole thing.
Okay.
Is I think that as Christians, we've ended up veering into a rights discussion.
Okay.
So this is against my rights. I shouldn't be forced to wear a face mask. I shouldn't be forced to do all of these things that I don't want to do from government legislation. And in our heads, we've assumed that Jesus has gone, yeah, your rights is my utmost concern.
Yeah.
So like Christians have felt this justification to push back against some of these things from a rights perspective. And I'm not sold on that argument from a Christian perspective. I actually feel like Jesus goes, your rights are quite unimportant to me.
Okay.
What's really important is, are these things actively preventing you from having a relationship with me?
Do you really think that, though? As in, like, how far... If you take that to its nth degree, and they say, right, we're not just locking down church for a month, we're locking down church, right?
Yeah.
If you take your argument to the nth degree, just like God isn't interested in my rights, at some point you will become non-compliant with government instruction, right?
Yeah.
Like the early church would not have existed if they became compliant to the Roman Empire, right? So how do you decipher what laws you keep and what laws you reject?
Yeah. Great question. I don't have any good answers on that. So if you do, please write them in the comments. But here's some of my basic thinking.
Come on, let's hear it.
I think there's two things around that, the conversation you're asking about.
Okay.
The one is there a difference between offense and persecution? And I think because of COVID, we have blurred that offends me as that's persecution now.
Okay.
And I'm not too sure that if you took the early church like leaders and put them in a room and said, guys, they're making us wear masks. I don't know if they would have gone, whoa, this is religious persecution. How are you guys going to get through this?
Yes.
So I think that there's some kind of a conversation around that. And I think as church, we need to become way more engaged in understanding where our people are and then being able to look and go, this is detrimental. So we know from a Sunny Hill perspective, full lockdown, I think there would have been if we went into a full lockdown again, a serious conversation because we've seen the detrimental effect that has had on people's faith.
Yeah, and psychology.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the psychology of the whole thing, the mental strain, the relational breakup. It feels to me like that's way more spiritual.
Yeah.
And that's it. It was a secular decision made by government to respond to a pandemic. I totally get it. But the spiritual impact was dramatic.
Yeah.
I just find it really hard to make that argument when people go, face masks. I'm like, I don't feel that. I don't kind of experience
and you know
that.
what? Like when I've had a good night's sleep, I think I'm on board with you there. And that was something that the Lord challenged me on many months ago. We're just like, hey, if this face mask is preventing your worship, there's bigger issues here than the face mask and what Boris is doing. But certainly, I mean, I guess my reflection on the whole pandemic, because obviously things have changed now for us in Britain. And it's a difficult one because I'm obviously really happy about the outcome that's been made. Now, I know that not everyone is happy about the outcome, but I'm happy about it. But the weird thing, and the question you've got to ask is, like, what's so significant on March 24th? So nothing's changing in terms of necessarily the risk. Maybe you could say the volume of vaccinations, maybe, but people are still getting hospitalized.
Yeah.
There's still apparently people dying from this thing.
Yeah.
All we're deciding to change on the 24th is our mentality on COVID.
Yeah.
Not the actual... The risks aren't changing.
Yeah.
You know, so we're just deciding as a nation, we're now going to look at COVID akin to the flu, not some kind of death-eating, monster.
So this raises an interesting question for me, which I wanted to throw at you around this line of thinking. Do you think as Christians, the underpinning motives of the government should dictate the response that we do to the situation? So is it that obviously, if you're in the UK, you would have been following the news over the last couple of cycles, and what you would have seen happen in the past week is everybody in Britain, except apparently Boris Johnson's cabinet, calling for him to kind of resign office.
Yeah.
One of the Conservatives defecting and becoming a Labour person.
That makes me laugh for a number of reasons. And like any Labourites out there, kudos to you, fair play. But like if you defect to the Labour Party, you're essentially saying I'm content to not being in a power position for the next 15 to 20 years of my life. So take that, Boris Johnson, kind of thing. I mean, he's obviously following his conscience and his kind of gut, but certainly I was like, wow.
But
that's an interesting move.
There is like at the top of the government, we've got to assume there is chaos. I mean, every news article you read, whether it's mainstream media, kind of alternative media, on the side media, conspiracy, whatever it is all talking about chaos at number 10. It's just absolutely chaos working out. And in the light of all of this, all of a sudden, we're presented with not just one or two new freedoms.
Yeah.
Like with a basket of freedom. Like here is just the plethora of freedom for you to go down. And it raises that big question for me. Like as Christians, how much do we just go, oh, amazing, this fits my narrative, this fits where I'm at, this fits what I want, so let's just do it.
Yeah.
And how much of it do we need to begin to go, is there something underneath this? What is the motive behind this? And should that dictate the response we have to it?
You know, I was thinking about this. Like is the new freedoms that have been presented to us in the last 24 hours, in the last 3 or 4 days, is it this idea that like, deflection from Partygate at Downing Street, like everyone's hacked off. Let's let them not wear masks. Yeah, almost like a trade-off. Like we may have kicked you in the bits, but here's a Kinder Egg kind of scenario. But like, you're totally right, because my feel is, now this, you need to hear this in full context, right? I'm kind of happy about the parties at Downing Street.
Okay.
Right? Because I think that they serve the outcome I want.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
And I was having this discussion/debate with my mother-in-law yesterday, and it was all around this idea of like if not Boris, it's only someone else who we can't really trust. Like politicians are kind of put into the same camp as estate agents.
Okay.
Like, can they really be Christians and politicians at the same time? Like, are you surprised when an estate agent fobs you off with some gutless lie about the fact, it's lost in the paperwork or the solicitors are holding it up? You just kind of accept that, like, in order to do this job, you kind of have dirty hands, right? Which means that, like, I am not surprised. Disappointed, yes. Surprised, no. So to get Boris Johnson out, who goes in? Who's going to be any better? Because government isn't the hope for the United Kingdom. Government isn't the hope for my salvation. Government isn't the hope for my future.
Hillary Clinton is. Oh, sorry, I thought you were going somewhere else with that.
No, absolutely not. But definitely not. But like, I certainly feel like, now I know that lots of people at home are feeling infuriated and livid. Like even on our staff team, people are very passionate about this, and I get it. Like, I really get it. But I just guess I'm not surprised. And in equal measure, in some way, imagine if they tried to go into another lockdown now with all the revelation of these parties happening at number 10.
Yeah.
It would be civil chaos. It would be crazy. So the only way they could go was to give freedom back to the people.
Yeah.
So in some way, maybe what the devil intended to harm, God's using for good. Maybe. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Richard?
Yeah, that's complicated. That is complicated. I probably take more offense maybe than you do. And I don't think that you're unoffended by the parties, because I think that there is a base level of offense. But like you, I'm like, why are we surprised? Yeah. I'm probably more offended by the level of hypocrisy than I am by the parties.
Okay.
So I was saying this to my wife. I'd be more comfortable with them saying, yep, we had the parties. Everybody who was there is getting a fine like every other person has had to do across the country that's gotten caught.
Yeah.
But what it feels like is we were caught out at having a party, and we are trying to find reasons or excuses to not have to take the consequence of that. I'm not sold that he should go or that anyone should go, because I'm very uncomfortable. So some companies at the moment are busy talking about this idea of, if you're not vaxxed, like, you're going to have to pay extra for your health care.
Yes.
or even so IKEA was one of them.
Yeah.
If you aren't
Swedish
vaxxed,
frame.
you're
Yeah.
going to get less time, less pay if you have to go in isolation.
Yeah.
And even to the point of some companies potentially busy flirting with this idea of if you're not vaxxed, you can't work here anymore. That stuff worries me because I think that actually, so
It's wrong.
I don't think it's right. And so then when I look
morally
at
wrong.
and when I look at the government's thing, I think no one should lose their job because they had a party. But they should be held to the same standard the rest of us are, which is, Boris, you've now got a £6,000 fine or whatever that's going to be.
Yeah, the problem with that though, Richard, is like Boris Johnson with a £6,000 fine. What? Just sell a roll of wallpaper?
Yeah.
Surely, like.
Have another party and
Have
invite more
another
people.
party. Like the fines that are applied to the mass public.
Yes.
Politicians. Now I know that they're civil servants, so I know in theory they're not raking it in. But
Yes.
we'd be remiss to think that they don't have offshores and
I agree.
investments in their wife's name.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it kind of feels like how does Boris Johnson come back from this? Like, is it? Because in the midst of cancel culture now is rife.
Yeah.
Like, you do something or say something that violates my conscience or offends me slightly.
Yeah.
We're now going to cancel you, almost like erase you from the public consciousness.
Yes.
So, obviously, Boris Johnson, no one's really going to forget. But actually, that strong urge to kind of get him to resign and push him out of the picture.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just wondering, like, for Christians, that can't be our mindset, can
Yeah.
it? Like, in the context of forgiveness and mercy and grace, not that we become doormats, but surely there has to be a way back for people. So what would it take for that? And I think one of the things is apology, for example. I asked my mother-in-law this question. I was like, okay, because she was like, Boris should go. And I know that loads of people are. And I'm like, okay, is there any way that you think he could stay? And she spoke about an apology. But I think apologies don't really work anymore.
No.
Like, people get so entrenched in their rights and in their offense and stuff that actually, you see celebrities all the time. They tweet something from 11 years ago, and it gets scrutinized as though it's been assessed by today's values and today's principles and standards, and in light of all of the things in the culture at the time, and so things are being assessed in a different time. And then get scrutinized to the point where it's cancelled, and then they come out and they say, "Look, I'm sorry. That was a younger me, a more immature me."
Yeah.
And I just kind of feel sad by the fact that there's just no sense of. Now I know that the Downing Street Partygate thing is really fresh in the public's mind, so that's a harder one to go after. But cancel culture as a whole, I just think it's pretty demonic, man.
Yeah, and I think that one of the struggles is we end up becoming people as Christians who violate our principles depending on the situation.
Okay.
So, underlying a lot of the response we should be having to anybody is compassion. It just has to be.
Okay.
Jesus should be driving us to compassionate response.
Yes.
Not just blind acceptance of anything inappropriate or a tolerance of sin.
Yes.
But even inside of that is we still need to be compassionate towards those people. Yet it feels a lot to me like, oh, I'm against that. That's ridiculous. I can't believe it. And then as Christians, we become the very thing that we shouldn't be. We become super judgmental, Boris is this and these people are this and blah, 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 whatever it is. And you kind of lose the heart and we become surprised that sinful people are sinful.
Yes. Yes.
It's weird to me that is... are we truly shocked that Boris would probably not want to fully apologize for what happened and try to find a way to wiggle out of it? Any of us in his situation wouldn't do the same thing outside of kind of the Holy Spirit and Jesus going, do you know what?
Yeah.
That isn't the right response right now.
Yes.
Own it or do something different.
Yes.
Yet we kind of, and this is for me, kind of brings me back to that kind of idea, which I'm kind of wrestling through it. Is it the offense that we're now believing is persecution, which actually it's just offense, and so we should respond to it differently? Persecution should drive us to respond in a certain way, but offense should drive us to respond wholly different to that thing. And how much of what we're experiencing at the moment that Christians are looking at and just going, it's just offensive. It's offensive maybe to our faith, to our values. It is.
Yes.
We need to work through that and be compassionate in our response over the government's thinking, oh, the government is persecuting the church right now.
Yeah.
I feel like if anything, if there is a persecution going on, they're persecuting the country. Like, we're
Yes.
all in it together.
All in
It's
it
not
together.
unique.
Well, definitely, and I think we spoke about that. I think maybe on episode 1, I can't remember where we spoke about it, but that was one of the things that my wife helped me with this, Louise. You know, when I was feeling a bit low about the restrictions that were affecting the church significantly, like a year plus ago, Louise was like, Dom, this isn't persecution, because it's the same for gyms, it's the same for restaurants, it's the same for cinemas.
Yeah.
You can't call it a persecution when it's societal wide. I mean, I guess you could call it a national sense of oppression, oppressing people if you're cynical like that. But ultimately, we can't pretend like Christians are getting a harsher deal than the rest of the world. And that really helped me, because I was like, that's really true. Like, where I would probably, you know, develop an uprising in the life of Sunny Hill is if they said, no, gyms can open, restaurants can open, go to the cinema, but churches remain closed. Then we've got issues.
Yeah.
And maybe it's at that point where the early church would stand up and be counted, where it's like, hey, this isn't just a church thing.
Yeah.
So I think like the face mask issue, going back to that, we took a nice little segue, is definitely, because I'm mindful even people watching will definitely be, and with fair reason, anti-Boris right now, anti-Conservative Party, anti the relaxation of restrictions.
Yeah.
And so in that, as Christians, it's like, and I had a bit of a check, because I said to Louise, we should burn face masks. Right. That was one of my things. Didn't the women's movement do that to their bras at some point in
Next
history?
week at Fire Face Masks.
Yeah, well, I just thought it'd be so cool but actually to be sensitive to the concerns and fears of others. Now, you don't just want to leave people festering in their anxiety, so we have to be mindful of that. And I guess that's the challenge for a person like me, and I know there's plenty of us out there, is like, just because maybe COVID isn't a top fear of ours doesn't mean it's not a top fear of someone else's.
Yeah.
And so being a Christian isn't just about enjoying liberty. It's about loving the person who, you know, maybe has fears that you don't have.
Yeah.
How do I say? I don't know. Maybe you can help me. I feel like I'm waffling a bit there.
I think you're right, and I think that this will become the big debate in the next phase, is going to be, well, all of the restrictions are lifted, so should church lift all of the restrictions?
Yeah.
Just because the government said that it's okay, is it okay? Yeah. And like, I think that as church, we have to find compassion in that, but not be afraid to follow where the government is taking us. So one of the things that I anchor into at Sunny Hill is we've never stood outside of the government restrictions.
No.
We just never have. We've always looked and gone, this is the guidance, this is what we'll institute and practice. And at times, those conversations were difficult because there was an agreement in a room about should we or shouldn't we? What would that look like? But I think that somehow we found a way to navigate. It's not persecution. It's just that we don't like it, but it's what the government guidelines and let's do it. And I think on the flip side is when all of these restrictions are now eased and awesome, we should still go with that. We should go, we are opening it up. I think the compassionate response is if someone arrives and is at Sunny Hill and they're going, do you know what? I want to still wear my face mask. Cool. I want to still have social distance conversations. That's cool. We're not practicing that. We're not enforcing it. But you still can do that because actually we are showing love and compassion towards you. And you may look and go, at the moment, I'm not comfortable to be back in the room yet. That's all right. That's cool. Like, that feels to me like the right compassionate response over, no, we don't care. You should be doing this. And if you don't like it, well, we're going to stick 20 people around you and they're all going to lay their hands on you and pray for you in this intense way that like really...
Cast off the face mask.
Like, and I think that for me, but I think what will happen is the exact opposite. And it's going to become this polarizing conversation amongst church.
I hope not, but it might. But I think the goal is to be like Christ. And I think in that sense, like, it's like that whole passage in the scriptures that talks about eating meat, doesn't it? Like for some, their faith permits it, and for others, not so much. And it's hard because it's not saying if you don't do that, if you do that, then you've got greater faith. But it certainly speaks to this kind of sense of respect. I love you enough to kind of, and there's other areas of my life that maybe I'm different on, and maybe you think, oh, Dom, you could see it this way, or you don't need to be scared of that. Have different anxieties. I think like the COVID thing, you know, obviously I'm not in the vulnerable camp, really. I'm not that old, really.
I mean, one of the vulnerable signs was obesity. So let us just leave it there.
Mate, you're so fattest. You're definitely the fattest.
Takes one to know one.
It
Is
takes
that
one
what
to
we're
know
saying?
one. Yeah, well, exactly.
Pot kettle black.
Well, what have we changed the name from? Not from Fire Mountain to two
Two
fatties
fat
at a table.
guys sitting at a table hoping the chairs don't break. That's where we're at right now. So I want to circle back to this cancel culture thing. So if you haven't seen it, I was telling Dom about it this morning. I read this news article, Dairylea, because we're looking for sponsors. Dairylea, because obviously Pepsi, nothing. No, you've brought nothing.
You brought nothing.
We've even given up on Diet Coke, hoping to go focused. Nothing. But anyway, losing track. So Dairylea, soft cheese company, put out an advert. 2 kids hanging upside down, eating a soft cheese. Parents are sitting on a park bench behind them. That's the advert.
Yeah.
That is the sum total of the advert. Went out on ITV. 14 people complained. So 14 people
in the whole of the
UK wrote in complaining about this hugely risky message that Dairylea is sending to children, which raises another question. Which kids are watching Dairylea adverts and going, this is my source of information? Anyway, so that then produced this complaint, which then meant ITV had to go and speak to a charity who said, oh, it's really risky. To which Dairylea did a response.
And the complaints were kids eating upside down.
Kids are eating upside down. Soft cheese upside down. And it's really risky because it's telling kids it's okay to eat upside down.
Okay.
I have lots of questions over this. Dairylea releases a statement, which is basically saying, do you know what? Actually, we've spoken to experts before we put this advert out. There is zero risk to a child eating soft cheese upside down.
But how can they say there's zero risk?
Well, because it's soft cheese.
Yeah, but it can still get stuck.
Can it get stuck?
I mean, I'm not one for cancelling the advert because kids shouldn't be stupid, right?
But that's the whole thing. So it reaches this point where basically from 14 people, Dairylea has had to cancel the advert, change the end of it, so remove the kids eating the Dairylea cheese. And ITV said, if we show it, we'll only show it after the 9 o'clock water shed. So kids aren't at risk.
That's why it's called Dare. Dairy.
That for me is absolute.
Do you Dairylea do this?
Craziness when it comes to this whole idea of kind of cancel culture. For me, it's this issue of offense, so big.
Well, I just want to suggest something, right? I think because your claim is it's totally safe, next week we set up an appliance where you hang upside down and you eat a triangular piece of Dairylea.
2 things over that. Let's do it. Yeah. How strong is that appliance going to be? Because it's not the Dairylea cheese that will kill me.
We'll get a cherry picker.
A pole impaling me as it breaks and I fall. And secondly, I like the fact you think I'm going to be able to get up on a device to hang upside down.
I think that's why we're going to do it. We're going to do that. So next week, you need to watch Fire Mountain because I'm going to have to think really hard about how we do this. But how do we get you upside down eating a bit of Dairylea cheese
it's
and
happening.
See how safe it is for you?
We're doing it. We're doing it.
Oh, I look forward to that.
We're all over it.
Okay.
And I know we're talking about a lot of things, and if you disagree with us, please stick it into the comments. If you agree with us, stick it into the comments. Also, if you can, please email firemountain@sunnyhill.church. We'd love to hear your thoughts over it. I mean, but cancel culture.
We're talking about disagreeing just before we go into a song, right? It was really great, actually, because on Facebook, Carrie and Jonathan Scampton, friends of Sunny Hill now, amazing, they disagreed with me on the Novak Djokovic thing, and obviously they're Australian, so they have more of a right to an opinion than I do on the whole thing. But actually, really valid ideas in the Facebook chat around. I'm just going to find it actually because I thought it was really helpful. And thank you to all those people who commented saying that they really value these sorts of conversations because often you don't hear this kind of manner of talk in church. Probably for a reason. Probably for a reason because we're about to get cancelled probably.
Well, only next week when I eat Dairylea upside down, and then there's a run of kids who all go, I need to eat cheese upside down, and this is risking my life.
Yeah, well, that's true. But one of the things that Jonathan said was that, the more Djokovic spoke, the more he made things look bad for himself, choosing not to isolate if he was positive for one thing. So, and there was that. As the week went on, there were certain things coming to light which weren't as they seemed to be at the point where we recorded this episode, or that episode. And obviously they were pro-team Australian government and all that kind of stuff, which I think is kind of impressive considering that they're from Melbourne, which has been the city that has been in the biggest lockdown of the whole world. Yeah. Yet they are still pro-government, which I think is pretty kudos to them. Well done for kind of keeping your alliance and allegiance there, because I'd be pulling my hair out, man. But yeah, the other thing I liked as well is that, like, one of the things that was said was about Boris Johnson taking liberties when other people are impacted by decisions to limit their liberties. Not a deal breaker at the same time, but you hope leaders apologise and learn from their mistakes. And I think that's the big thing, isn't it? Is I think what we want to see is politicians owning their mistakes and not trying to fudge the story, not trying to hide the story, prevent the story, but just saying, listen, we made a mistake. I'm so sorry. And obviously that doesn't necessarily mean that they keep their job, but certainly I think it's about recovering the art of sincere apologizing, isn't it, that we need to think about in life, in our own lives as well.
Yeah, and I think on the apology is it's difficult. Apologies don't just create trust, they also emanate from trust.
Yes.
And if you don't trust the person who's apologizing, it's normally you're not going to hear the apology. Yeah. And I think that is a challenge for Christians as we look at all of this chaos. Is we have a trust that God has put these people in place, like He tells us.
Yes.
And so when they do apologize, our starting point can't just be cynicism. I think it has to actually be, God, you're doing something here, and I may not see it because it is crazy, and these people are just doing stuff that is deeply offensive to us. But I trust that what's working itself out. And I think that opens our heart to be way more open to the apologies, the conversations that are unfolding.
That's so good. Well, great insight. We're going to jump to a worship song. I Will Extol the Lord, and it's by our friends in the Equippers again when they did it at their conference a couple of years ago. And it's brilliant because it's lifted straight out of Scripture. And this song really blessed me in the midst of like the lockdowns, because it was this whole idea, your praise will always be on my lips. So it's not dependent on anything that's happening at Westminster or anything that's happening at the world. Even if more restrictions were added to our shoulders this week, you know, God's praise should still be on our lips. And so in this moment, we encourage you to use this as a way of responding to God and thanking Him that He's always worthy of praise, regardless of our circumstances.
I will extol the Lord at all times. His praise will always be on my lips. My soul will boast, my soul will boast in Him. The afflicted will lead and rejoice, glorify the Lord with me. Let's sing. I will extol the Lord at all times.
Let's pray together, shall we? Father God, thank you so much, Lord, that you have delivered us from all our fears. And so, God, I pray, God, that truth would become our reality. Oh, God, that as Christians, as people who walk with Jesus, need not fear anything, any virus or anything in this world that could seek to run us down. And so, God, I just pray, God, that as we move into this next phase of Fire Mountain, Lord, that, God, your Spirit would be with us, revealing truth to us and transforming us into the likeness of Christ. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. And we've already been speaking about a huge amount of things. Huge amount of topics have been covered.
Loads.
Again, if you have comments or questions or disagreements or things that you're thinking yourself, or you want to go, hey, I think that, please pop them into the comments below on YouTube. Also, if you want to in Facebook, pop them into the comments or email firemountain@firemountain.church.
Firemountain@firemountain.church.
I mean, firemountain@sunnyhill.church.
Get
that
it right,
was
man.
wrong. Firemountain@sunnyhill.church.
Yeah.
Also, if you're on YouTube, subscribe to Fire Mountain so you can get notified of all of the latest videos coming out of Sunny Hill and the latest Fire Mountain episodes. Hit the little bell thing. It's going to be somewhere below, and that will give you a notification so that you'll know what's happening, which will be really good.
Great.
And also, if you can, email Dairylea and Pepsi Max and say, hey,
Sponsor this show.
sponsor the show. So we're going into episode 3. We're going into sermon 3 of our new The Way series that's been happening. We've been speaking about quite a lot already. Surrender last week, what a great sermon. And obviously this Sunday kind of moving into some new territory.
Yeah.
Quickly going to be playing the promo. You would have seen this on social media. If you haven't, here is a promo just to set up the series for you, and then we're going to jump into The Way.
Well, that's great. Just before I get into this, I feel the pressing need just to give some clarity. I am anti-Downing Street parties, okay? I don't want any emails or hate mail to that end, right, where people start saying, can't believe you condone these parties. I do not.
During that worship song, you were saying to me, I'm so for it. I wish I was there.
Why wasn't I invited? I could have wine and Dairylea. Maybe they were hanging upside down. No, I am against the Downing Street parties. All I'm saying is I'm not surprised, okay? Disappointed, not surprised. Okay?
Great.
So let's move on.
So Dom.
Yes.
2 minutes, summarize where we're at in the current series,
Okay,
The
cool.
Way, and then let's get into what are we talking about.
So week 1, we looked at the fact that Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And really the context of Jesus saying that was worry, troubled hearts, disciples freaking out about the future, and Jesus basically affirming them, saying, listen, I'm going to prepare a place for you, and it's going to be good. And so we looked at fixing our faith, fixing our focus, and fixing our footpath. And Thomas, the doubter, as is his nickname in the New Testament, which is lovely, says, well, Jesus, we don't know the way you're going. And Jesus says, listen, I am the way, the truth, and the life. In other words, it's important that we understand that Jesus isn't just our pathway to heaven. He's our pathway to the fullest experience of life on earth now. And so in light of that, week 2, we looked at what's our response to that truth. Well, really, there's only one. Well, there's many responses. You can be indifferent. You can not care. You can choose to ignore it. Or you have to choose to surrender to the way, the truth, and the life. In other words, being an indifferent Christian is an oxymoron. You can't be a follower of Christ and not surrender all. And so often in our experience and in my life, I think I look back and I look at times where I surrendered some, but Jesus and the call of the gospel is to surrender everything. And it's not a posture that we run to because surrender feels like defeat. But in the kingdom, surrender we know is victory. It's where strength comes. It's where power comes. It's where hope comes. So actually, when you raise the white flag or throw in the towel to God, yes, you're acknowledging the fact that, like, Lord, I can't do it anymore. But actually what you're saying is, I need help.
Yeah.
And that's such a powerful posture. So even in the scriptures, it says, in your weakness, God's strength is made perfect.
Yeah.
It's only made perfect when you acknowledge your weakness and your inability to get the job done in life. So that's the backdrop to where we are now.
And if at the moment, through kind of this current series, you've really felt like God moving or speaking to you, you can email testimony at sunnyhill.church, because we'd love to be gathering in some of those things that God is saying and doing and how he's been moving, so we can platform it as encouragement to other people, not just across Sunny Hill, but actually much wider than that. There is something about us hearing what God is doing in the life of others that really just inspires us to move forward. So testimony at sunnyhill.church, or if you disagree, Fire Mountain at sunnyhill.church.
Great.
I mean, that's the way to go.
Let's go. So today, I'm going to be talking about how to change a city, okay? Wow. Or how to change a town or a village, if you're in a village.
Basically, throw parties at
Throw
your
parties,
office.
definitely throw parties and invite everyone to them. In Acts 9, and for those of you who don't know, Acts 9 follows the gospel. So Acts, the book of Acts, is a recording of historical events that happened after Jesus' death and resurrection. And it's really the story of the early church growing into the purposes of God. And in Acts 9, we meet this character that is called Saul. Now, Saul goes on to become Paul. They're the same person in the New Testament. There's a Saul in the Old Testament who was a king of Israel. But this Saul is different. His New Testament, in other words, he came after Jesus, and eventually he became Paul, who we all know and love. But before Saul was Paul, he was Saul. Okay, you're tracking with me.
So we got Saul, who's Paul, but at the moment,
but not Saul of Old Testament,
Saul,
the New
but
Testament
not the Saul of David,
who goes on to become,
but the Saul of the New Testament.
Exactly. And we read this because Saul's an interesting character because he was anti-church and he was anti-Christ, and he was all about giving his life to oppress the church, persecute the church, imprison the church, and kill the church off. He wanted to eradicate the church. Okay, so Acts chapter 9, 1-2. We read this: Saul was uttering threats with every breath and was eager to kill the Lord's followers. Okay, so he wanted to kill Christians. Okay, we read in verse 2, he requested letters addressed to the synagogues in Damascus. So he wanted inside information. When I go to Damascus, let me see who is the church so I know who to imprison and persecute and all this kind of stuff. Just to say, Saul was credible, had profile, and had office. So he was able, if you like, he was like the police.
Yeah.
So he was able to oppress the church legally and persecute them.
Yeah.
And what we read in verse 2, he asked for these letters addressed to the synagogues in Damascus, asking for their cooperation in the arrest of any followers, listen to this, of the way he found there. So we see this term here, followers of the way. So I think that's a really interesting thing because that's the first time we read that in the New Testament.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus didn't call the church the way. Jesus didn't call Christians the way. But here we see the Romans and those against the church referring to the church, Christians, as followers of the way. And it's kind of interesting because why followers of the way? Why is that term so powerful?
Yeah.
Well, it's because ultimately in John 14, Jesus says, I am the way. So when they're talking about the church being followers of the way, they're talking to this idea that they're followers of Jesus, but they're also followers of a distinct way of life that was different to Rome.
So you're saying like followers of a rule of life, like like this is how they behavior, actions on the ground manifest.
Definitely, yeah, and that's a really helpful insight. Just query because like last week spoke about this idea that the word for way in Greek is hodos, okay? And it speaks to the essence of life. It speaks to actually, literally, the path and road of life. So it's like when Jesus says, I am the way, he's saying I'm the path, I'm the road, but also speaks to the essence of life. So, when Paul or Saul and the Romans refer to the church, they don't call them the church, they call them followers of the way because they are embodying behaviors, habits and attitudes that are consistent with the way that Jesus was and evidenced in Jesus's life. It's kind of interesting because like one of the synonyms we know for the way of life is culture. In other words, when you try to describe to somebody what is a culture, you say it's a way of life.
Yeah.
Okay. So, which is where we get the word cult from. Okay. Interestingly, obviously, culture and cult, it's like a group of people that ascribe to behaviors and habits that make them distinctive and almost like exclusive to the world around them.
Yeah.
So you go to, I don't know, Marijuana Mountain, okay, looking at that plant there, you know, you know, in an island on the Pacific, and they're all wearing purple robes and bare feet and smoking who knows what and preaching peace and love and, you know, all this kind of stuff. There's a way of life that exists in that commune, which makes them cult-like, which means there's a culture.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, and that's why the Romans were using this word way to speak of this sect idea.
Yeah.
By calling them this, they were trying to put people off.
Yeah.
By calling them a sect. And actually, you see this a bit later on, because in Acts 24, when Paul has been converted to Christianity, stands before Felix, and he says this in verse 14, I admit that I worship the God of our ancestors as a follower of the way, which they call a sect.
Yeah.
So we now see that there's a reputation on the church in Acts of being like a sect, like a cult, because there is something so distinct about their lives, about their habits and their behaviors. But ultimately, obviously this cult is different because it's not rallied around a man.
Yeah.
It's rallied around a God.
Yeah.
A man who is divine, not just a man with good philosophy or good thoughts about the world. Yes, he's got those, but actually it's rallied around the way, the truth, and the life, like the essence of everything. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, because I don't want to keep just waffling
no.
over here.
I think it's fascinating when we begin to deconstruct, and that's a really loaded term anyway. But when we begin to unpick,
consider.
Let us say unpick.
Yeah, unpick.
Consider.
Yeah.
Put thought to.
Yeah.
Look at the milieu of what you're saying, because I think there's an uncomfortableness in us when we hear the term cult and Christian put together.
Yes.
But what we miss out is right at the formation of the church. That's exactly how the rest of society looked at them.
Yeah, right.
They thought, these guys are weird.
Yes.
What they're practicing is strange. It's going against the norm. And we might find it difficult, but in a time when you'd have things like, you know, temple prostitutes and debauchery.
Yes.
For someone to get up and go, I'm going to live a pure, holy, clean life where I'm actually watching what I do with who I do it and how I do it was cultish for those people. They were like, this way of life is so out there, is so strange.
Yes.
It would be like us going into a place where guys are wearing purple robes, dancing around with tinfoil on their hats. It's the same kind of a vibe.
Yes.
And yet inside of that is kind of, that's what Jesus was instituting, this rule.
Yes.
This is how you should be looking at living.
Yes.
Because you've chosen to follow me. This is my way.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, exactly. Well, I mean, ultimately, we know that Christianity in church isn't a cult. And I know to the world it can seem like that. But ultimately, if it was, it exists for those outside of it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So that's what makes it inherently different to the standard cult you'd find on Marijuana Mountain, where it's all about, you know, self-enlightenment and all this kind of stuff. It's a body of people that are on the earth because Jesus wants to reach people.
Yeah.
And I think...
Can I just quickly say something into that? Because I think it's so important what you're saying. The church was never set up to be exclusionary.
No.
But it was to be inclusive and pull everybody in.
Yeah.
And when we lose that, I think we do move into that weird cultish territory.
Yeah.
Where cults are about how do we exclude everyone else and become so inclusive. It's only about us.
Yes.
And when the church ends up at that point, I think it does tread into a dangerous
the reason that you typically find cults on mountains or buying up desert in Arizona, right, is because their ideology is one of physical separation and segregation from the world. Yeah. To move themselves geographically. Yeah. Now, typically what happens in this cult is all manner of nonsense and sin. Yeah. Right. Self-gratification and all sorts, right? Yeah. Christianity is the opposite. So the Bible says that we're in the world but not of the world. So the inclination is you spiritually become separate, but physically you are incarnate. Yeah. You're part of it. You are in the system. You are in the, you're in the society. You're in the culture. The worst thing you do as a Christian is move to a mountain for the rest of your life. Yes, there'll be times where you retreat and go to the mountain like Jesus, but the goal is always to come back to civilization. The goal is always to come back to the people.
So good.
And in Christianity, like sometimes you think, oh, I just like to run away and live on an island and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But that's not the way.
No.
The way of Christ is to get into the mess, to get into the chaos, and to actually reform culture.
Yeah.
So that's the whole point of changing the city.
Yeah.
Is we're talking about reforming culture, because, you know, to say like, well, it makes sense that the church is a cult. You know, you could say the same about the British Empire. British values and thinking is cult-like.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example that, like, when I got married to Louise like 15 years ago, and we went to Fuerteventura for our honeymoon, it was idyllic, it was beautiful, and really to submerge ourselves into the culture of Spain would be to go and find a nice little Spanish bar serving paella in a pan, listening to Spanish guitar with flamenco dancers and all that kind of stuff. But the truth of the matter is, on our first night, I went looking for an English bar that was playing the Liverpool game, okay,
Selling pork pies.
serving sausages and chips and ketchup, right? Because that British identity in me died hard in a different environment.
Yeah.
So, like, we all carry cult, like, you know, all of us do.
Yeah.
We have our mindsets and our values that are generally shaped by the place in which we live.
Yeah.
And this is what's really important to think about, being the followers of the way, because Paul says in Philippians 3, he says to the church in Philippi, he says, and so Paul is this same guy that was knocked off a horse on the road to Damascus that I read at the beginning. He says, join together in following my examples, brothers and sisters, and just as you have us as a model. Okay, so again, there's the model, there's something to imitate and copy. Keep your eyes on those who live as we do. For as I have often told you before, and now tell you again, even with tears, may live as enemies of the cross of Christ. Their destiny is destruction, their God is their stomach, and their glory is in their shame. Their mind is on earthly things, but our citizenship is in heaven. So, all that to say that, like, when I go to Spain, I don't all of a sudden become Spanish.
No.
I'm British, and I'm in Spain. In the same way, when you're a Christian, you look like a human, but make no mistake about it, your citizenship is in heaven, which means that you bring the values and the ethos and the behaviors and the habits that speak to that identity in a foreign place. I love the idea of the Monopoly game of the prison, like where you're just passing, where you're just visiting jail. There's this sense in the church, in the early church at least, where the ways of the Christians were so distinct and so obvious that people knew that they were followers of a way, and they were, you know, generosity, sacrifice, service, love, forgiveness, inclusion, these things, and it became an irresistible force. You know, post Jesus' death, where you see that the Lord added to their number daily those who are being saved. Why? Because it wasn't about rules. It was about a way. It was about a vibe. It was about a culture. It was about an ethos. And I think it's really interesting because, like, even with Saul, so Saul is going off to Damascus to persecute the followers of the way. But on the way, he encounters the way, Jesus, right? Knocks him off a horse, which changes Paul's way for the rest of his life. So that the people that he was going to persecute, which are followers of the way, he becomes a follower of the way because he's now surrendered to the way, on the way to Damascus, right? So there's something in Saul that shifts. And this is really what I want to get to, and I'm going to make it really succinct as possible. But a bit later on in Acts, right, in Acts 19, you see the transformation of Ephesus. You see the transformation of a city. Now, I'm not saying that everyone in Ephesus became Christians, but what I am saying is the culture of the church disrupted the culture of Ephesus, because you know, you had the blacksmiths who were complaining because idol worship was becoming less popular because more people were converting to Christianity. Now, ultimately, Paul didn't necessarily go to Ephesus with the intent to kind of run these people out of business, but the culture was so alive in Paul that when he went, it transformed a city. And actually, you know, you should read it for yourself, but like it refers to the followers of the way. So, Demetrius, a silversmith who had a large business manufacturing silver shrines, it said that he had issues with people of the way. Why? Because their way of life now was affecting the culture and the city in which he lived.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like that idea that, like, this is what happens when you become sold out to the way. It's not like, I'm not saying it's not strategic and tactical, but certainly Paul went as a follower of the way, and he allowed the way to be so present in his being and in his attitude and in his words that actually it became compelling, and it overhauled the vibe of a whole city. And I think that's just a cool idea, isn't it?
There's this theologian, I can't remember his name, but he speaks about the fact that what happens at the fall is humanity loses a part of what it actually means to be human.
Yeah.
When Adam and Eve sinned, they became not less human,
Yeah.
but a part of what it actually means for us to be human beings was robbed from them by the devil. And what Jesus comes is to actually restore humanity back to human beings.
Yes.
And it's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
This idea of actually we become a different kind of human as we begin to follow Jesus.
Yes.
Because what he restores into us as the Spirit comes into us and as he begins to give us life is he goes, this is who you were always meant to be. This is who you are.
Right.
Like I'm not changing you now and making you into this, wow, this is something so brand new. But he goes, no, this is always who you were. This is your humanity that I'm now placing back in you and putting it into you, and this is how you should live. Like, how should human beings be engaged with each other? Jesus looked and saw love to the people around him. He didn't accept them all. He didn't tolerate them all in terms of just going, whatever you want to do, that's cool. But it says that he looked on everybody with love. He looked over an entire city and his heart broke for that city. This deeply human way of existing that he's now saying to the people who choose to follow him. And I think it's interesting in the context of what you're talking about, and with Paul kind of going into Ephesus, this idea of God putting humanity back into spaces and people looking and going, that's who I should always have been. I actually think it's why the early church, when it was busy emerging, people looked at it and said, wow, I want that. I want that. And I don't think it's because they were just giving away their money to each other, or I think it's because people looked and went, oh, so that's what it is to be human.
The essence of life.
I want to be human. Like, that's what I want. It's the way.
Definitely. And I think that's the thing, is like, I guess for me, it's not like, oh gosh, like, let's take a city, let's win Bournemouth and Paul for Christ. Obviously that's our desire, our deep desire. But sometimes we look at the macro and it becomes debilitating, because how can I do that? Honestly, when you're talking about maybe 350,000 people in a conurbation, and you look at the size of Sunny Hill and go, man, it's just, how will that ever work? Or even all the churches combined in that area. And I think it's about, like, it's not putting your eyes on the city. It's about putting your eyes on the way. That's the win. So when I think about the journey of Paul, and like, I've really cut down this message. So there's, listen to the video that comes out later today, or listen to the audio file from.
I mean, we say
Paul
video, but to be honest, it could be an audio. We'll see what happens.
We'll see. But like, Ephesus is affected, and if you like, transformed forever, because the church was transformed. And the church became transformed because individual households became transformed. And individual households became transformed because, like we see in Acts 9, individuals became transformed. So for me, the big idea of this message is, if we want to change the city, we've got to allow Jesus to change our heart. Because a changed heart will change our household. A changed household, you put two households on fire for Jesus in a church, the church is transformed. A church that's transformed can really then begin to speak to the powers and to the educational institutes like the halls of Tyrannus, like in Ephesus. So like, I guess for me, it's like, okay, we surrender to Christ, brilliant. We acknowledge our need for help, that we can't do this life on our own. Cool, what's next? Okay, now it's time to allow the way of Christ to absolutely embody in the way we live, the way we speak, the way we think, the way we relate, to allow the way of Christ to so change who we are and who we're becoming, that like the culture shifts, not because we're going, oh, today we're going to go and pick it outside Westminster on face masks, but just because there's a freedom and liberty in our very being, like you say, becoming more human. That speaks to the things that we touch and the place in which we live. So we don't hate the world, because God doesn't hate the world. Sometimes we hate systems and structures, for sure, but we love people. And that's the people that God loves. And on that basis, it's this idea that, like, I love the world, but I'm not of the world. And so I don't think like the world thinks, and I don't speak like the world speaks. Yet I stay here because actually there's this sense that Jesus prayed in the Lord's Prayer, your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. How does it happen? Through citizens of heaven, establishing the values of heaven on earth now. So it's not pie in the sky when I die. It's this idea right now, right in this moment, in my marriage, in my parenting, in my workplace, in my finances, but more than that, in my relationships with people who don't know Jesus yet. It's like demonstrating and modeling the life of Christ. And that's why Paul on a couple of occasions says, imitate me or follow in my example, because Paul was living in such a way that was affected by the way that it changed the way he lived for the rest of his life. And that's what I think we want to go for this year.
So good. And I think that there is something profoundly beautiful if people can see the picture. And I think it's what people miss is we're waiting so much for like God to change the city, when it's really going, if a parent could sit and just begin to practice the way with their children, where they speak about the things of God and what God is doing, and how God's moved in their lives, and how God's moved in the life of the family, and that child goes and speaks to his friends and go, you'll never guess what God's done in my family, and how God moved, and how that begins to trickle out when that family comes and talks to that parent and go, wow, my child said that this happened to you guys. Oh, that's true. And all of a sudden these things that are just, it's deeply human. Parents sitting, not obsessed with their devices, not obsessed with the TV, but obsessed with their children. Like friends obsessed with each other. Because God's doing these things. It feels to me like that deeply human connection of people who are looking with compassion on each other, looking for the betterment of each other, wanting to call blessing onto each other, wanting to call like, just you can be better than this, you can be more than this, God's got more for you. Like that picture feels like, wow, when the way and living a life that follows the way becomes how we live it, how could the city not end up being transformed? How could it not be different? Because Jesus is changing us. Which means he's going to change those who are connected to us. Which kind of means he will begin to change. And eventually it will be. I think you could end up at this point, but we've become obsessed with God changing the city that we forget actually God just begin to shift us.
And it's like the verse I quote most in Romans 12, but I just think it fits so many ideas that the gospel offers, which is like, don't conform to the pattern of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So the goal isn't, so again, it's that idea of separation from the world's ideas, but not segregation from the world. In the world, but you're different in the world. So the culture we want to build at Sunny Hill isn't one of retreat, it's one of presence. It's not one of separation, it's one of incarnation. That's the way of Christ. Followers of the way, they seek to build culture, not be built by culture. And I think that's the challenge, and that's the call on the church, is that like we're not just to adopt the culture of the world, we're to influence and inform and speak to, and so that's a big thing. But like you say, like that's not like, let's do that in the next 6 months. If we can commit our heart to following in that way and allow God to transform us, we won't always get it right, we won't always smash it out the park, but on the whole we're like, Jesus, I surrender, and now I want to walk in the way of Christ. Actually, over time, when a body of people, commit to that out, it changes things.
It's great.
That's awesome.
So good. Let's quickly pray about that, and then we're going to pause together. God, we want to be people who don't just talk about how great you are,
Yes.
who don't just with our mouths declare one thing, but with our lives live something else. But we want to be people who go, our behaviors, our rule of life,
Yes.
our habits, what we do, we align with you. We live out your way.
Amen.
And in that, God, we're just really reclaiming our humanity, our human beingness, the very way you've made us to engage and interact with each other in this world, simply because we're following the way. And in that, God, we can see that by us not just wanting you to come and change our city, but actually going truly change us,
Yes.
change me, so I can impact those around me, my family, my friends, those spheres that are close to me, can begin to shift and change the church, and can then begin to shift and change the city, God.
Yes.
That by simply letting you come and restore to us what sin takes from us ongoingly,
Yes.
will begin to change the city that we live in as we become followers of the way. And so I pray, come and do that. And you may be sitting there going, hey, I want to find out more about the way. I want to find out more about how I can begin to live my life and for Jesus and align my heart to how he wants me to be. I want to reclaim what I've lost and put humanity right back in me. You can go to sunnyhill.church. We have resource there to help you do that, to be able to find out. And you can also email office@sunnyhill.church and just say, hey, I want to find out more about Jesus, and somebody will get a hold of you. Or you can email firemountain@sunnyhill.church and say, hey, I want to find out more about Jesus, and someone will get a hold of you. But we don't just want to have great discourse here. We truly think that as we wrestle these things out, and as we discover more of who Jesus is calling us to be, we can see massive change happen all around us and in our culture. So we would encourage you, Sunny Hill God Church. That's exciting.
That's awesome. That's great. And so, yeah, thanks for watching today.
Yeah.
It's cool to spend time with you.
So next week,
Yeah.
we've got a special guest coming in.
We've got a special guest.
We got Louise Bird, who's going to be joining us.
Yes.
So if you want us to come up with the hardest question we can to throw Louise under the bus, put it in the comment. And then we'll see if we can basically... Well, the worry is Louise will have the answers and we'll look more stupid than we normally do.
Will. She'll definitely hold us more to, I don't know, a pastoral way of thinking, I should think.
I mean, we say that, but I'm sure we could break
She's
her.
like, I feel like, I don't know whether the Lord gave me a conscience, but he did when I got married, I got married 15 years ago. My gosh.
So, again, if you have anything that you want to say, any disagreements, please pop them down into the comments below or into the email firemountain@sunnyhill.church. We'd love to get more into it. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Definitely.
And yeah, we look forward to seeing you next week. We're going to be going out with another song by Equippers, and we will be back 10:30 next Sunday. Please join us for Fire Mountain. See you then.
See ya. Bye.
You are sweeping in, we are waiting here. You are all around, we can feel you now. Spirit move, do what only you can do. Spirit come, we are desperate for you. Have your way in us as we open up. Touch our hearts afresh, we won't leave the same. Spirit move, do what only you can do. Spirit come, we are desperate for you. Spirit move, do what only you can do. Spirit come, we are desperate for you. God Almighty, be exalted forever. God, we're desperate for your presence. We're crying out, we feel your holy fire.
There is a holy fire, breathing a new desire, stirring my heart to know, Jesus, you're in control. Standing in your presence, have my heart surrendered. Here on holy ground, set me on fire now.